I never thought I'd end up living above a bookstore, especially not at 26. But life doesn't really stick to the plans you make when you're 20 and full of ideas. My name's Ethan, and after a couple of rough years post-college and a detour through jobs I'd rather forget, I landed here above Willow and Company Books, a quiet little shop tucked on a side street near the edge of downtown. The place smelled like old paper and pine, and the sign out front had definitely seen better days. But the rent was cheap, and I needed time to save before applying to grad school again. I moved in on a Wednesday afternoon with 3 boxes, a used mattress rolled up tight, and a folding table that served as a desk. The landlord, a wiry guy named Tom with a permanent sunburn, handed me the keys and walked me through the creaky stairwell like he was showing off a museum exhibit. "Your water heater groans a little," he said, tapping the pipes with a wrench. "And the lady who owns the shop below, Elena, doesn't like noise, so try not to stomp." Elena. That was the first time I heard her name. "She's particular," Tom added, almost like a warning before giving me a look and heading back down the stairs without another word. Later that day, while unpacking, I heard the bell over the bookstore door chime. I looked out the small kitchen window that overlooked the alley and saw her for the first time. Elena. She was unlocking a side gate, her posture straight, movements precise, tall, maybe in her early 40s, with dark hair swept up in a no-nonsense bun, a fitted blazer over a plain black dress. Everything about her felt composed, controlled. Even the way she turned the shop sign from closed to open was deliberate, like she believed small things deserve full attention. Later, when I finally introduced myself in person, it was brief. I had knocked on the glass door to let her know I'd moved in, wanting to be polite. She looked up from a stack of books behind the counter. Not surprised, just mildly expectant. "You must be the new tenant," she said without smiling. Her voice was low, clear, with just the faintest rasp. "I'm Elena. I run the place." "I'm Ethan about," I said, holding out a hand that she didn't take. She nodded instead, giving me a glance that felt like she was sizing me up in seconds. "The walls are thin," she said. "If you play music or have people over, I'll hear everything." "I won't be a problem," I said quickly. "I mostly just read and exist quietly." Something in her expression shifted for a fraction of a second, like she was amused, but it passed. "Well," she said, "welcome." That was it. I walked out feeling like I'd just been dismissed from a job interview I hadn't applied for. But even then, I couldn't stop thinking about the way she held herself. Elegant without being showy, poised without trying too hard. It was the kind of presence that made you lower your voice a little without realizing it. That night, after unpacking the last of my books, I made a sandwich and sat by the window that faced the alley. The bookstore lights were still on below through the half-drawn shades. I could see Elena moving around alone, straightening displays, locking cabinets, turning off lamps one by one. She moved like someone used to silence, used to being alone and not necessarily bothered by it. She turned off the main light, and for a moment she just stood there at the counter, silhouetted by the glow of the street lamp outside. Then she reached behind her, tied her coat belt tight, and walked toward the door. As she stepped outside to lock up, she didn't look up at my window, but I held still anyway, like I didn't want to disturb whatever invisible rhythm she was moving to. I should have gone to bed after that. Instead, I stayed sitting there, lights off, just watching the street. There was something about her, about that quiet authority she carried, that made me wonder who she was when the door locked behind her. Not the shop owner, not the landlord's warning, not the woman reminding me the walls were thin, but the version of her who stood alone under the glow of an old street light, keys in hand, heading home to whatever was waiting upstairs. I didn't know then how much that one moment would stay with me, but it did. And something in me already knew this wasn't going to be just a place to crash while I saved up. It was going to be the start of something else. I told myself I just liked the smell of the bookstore, the way the mix of paper would polish and something vaguely herbal clung to the air. But the truth was, I kept finding reasons to go downstairs. Not every day. That would be obvious, just enough to pretend I was browsing. Sometimes I'd flip through a book I'd already read. Sometimes I'd just wander the aisles, letting my fingers trace the spines like I was trying to remember something I hadn't quite learned yet. Elena noticed. One afternoon, while I stood in front of a display of staff pickaxe, reading the back of the same book I'd picked up 3 days before, she glanced up from behind the counter and said, "You know, you don't have to pretend." I turned a little caught off guard. "Pretend what?" "That you're shopping. You never actually buy anything." I laughed a little embarrassed. Guilty. She didn't smile. Not exactly, but her eyes had a spark in them I hadn't seen before. Most people who hang around without buying something are either lonely or curious. Sometimes both. And which one do you think I am? She tilted her head slightly, still deciding. That was the first real conversation we had. From then on, it got easier. She'd ask what I was reading, and I'd return the question. We swapped at movie recommendations, compared the best coffee shops nearby, and debated whether winter in the city was underrated or just inconvenient. Her tone was always a little dry, like she didn't want to reveal too much, but I could tell she was letting me in just a little. Sometimes I caught her watching me out of the corner of her eye when she thought I wasn't looking, and I wasn't imagining the shift in her voice when I walked in. Less guarded, more curious. Then came the night with the boxes. I had just finished a late dinner and was heading up the back stairs when I saw her struggling with 2 heavy boxes outside the shop's rear door. The alley was dim, and she was trying to unlock the service entrance while balancing both loads awkwardly against her hip. "Need a hand?" I asked, already reaching for the top box. She hesitated for half a second, then nodded. "Thanks." We carried them up the narrow staircase to the upper level where I learned she had a storage room tucked above the back of the shop. The space was cluttered. Books, old signs, office supplies, but still somehow neatly chaotic, like everything had its place, even if it looked like it didn't. "You're organized," I said, setting the box down. She gave a small shrug. "Comes with being alone in a space too long. Eventually, you want control over something." There was something in her voice when she said that. Dry, yes, but also tired. Honest. I didn't push. Instead, I just nodded. And we stood there for a moment, not speaking. "Coffee?" she asked suddenly, almost like she surprised herself with the offer. "Sure." She led me back down to the shop, locked the door behind us, and then disappeared briefly into the back room. When she returned, she handed me a mug. No sugar, no milk, just black and strong. "Thanks," I said, taking a sip. It was bitter, but warm. She leaned against the edge of the counter, arms crossed. "You don't have to keep coming down here just to be polite, you know?" I met her eyes. "I'm not. I just like it here." There was a beat of silence. Then she said softly, "So do I." That night, something shifted. It wasn't dramatic. No lingering glances or accidental touches. But when I handed her back the empty mug, our fingers brushed for a second longer than necessary. And when I left, I found myself listening to the soft sound of her locking the door behind me. Not out of caution, but as a quiet ritual, like something closing, only to be opened again tomorrow. From then on, I found myself timing things, my coffee breaks, errands, even walks, so they might overlap with her routine. And more often than not, they did. She started letting me help with small things. Lifting boxes, fixing a jam drawer, holding the ladder while she dusted the top shelves. Every gesture felt more significant than it should have. And I think we both knew it. We never talked about it, but the silences between us weren't empty. They were full of something waiting to be named. One evening, as I stood outside the shop, watching the last light fade through the front window, I saw her inside, carefully placing a book back on a display. She paused, glanced toward the door like she sensed me there, and then looked away again with a small, unreadable smile. It was one of those cold, drizzly nights when the rain didn't pour, just hung in the air like a gray curtain. I had been upstairs for most of the afternoon trying to focus on reading, but mostly just listening to the rain tapping on the window. Below me, I could hear faint sounds from the shop, drawers opening, the low hum of a playlist. She only played when the store was empty. Elena liked her music quiet just enough to keep the silence company. Around evening, I heard the bookstore's front door lock. A few minutes later, there was a knock at the side entrance, the one that led up the stairs to my place. I opened it to find her standing there with a hood over her hair, a bottle of wine in one hand. "I was going to have a glass," she said, her voice calm, casual. Didn't feel like doing it alone. I blinked, caught off guard, but stepped aside. "Come in." She slipped past me without waiting for an answer, water droplets clinging to the shoulders of her coat. "You live like a college student," she said with a smirk, eyeing the bare walls and folding chair I called furniture. "I'm saving for grad school," I offered in defense, closing the door behind us. She raised an eyebrow, setting the wine on the counter. "That's what they all say." I grabbed 2 mismatched mugs, the only clean ones I had, and handed one to her. She poured generously. The room felt different with her in it. The kind of quiet that wasn't awkward, just aware, like we were both listening for something without saying what it was. We sat on the floor near the window because I didn't have a couch and drank in silence for a few minutes. The city sounds were faint, muffled by the rain in the walls. Elena tucked her legs beneath her, her posture always just a little more composed than mine. "So," I said, "what brings the bookstore owner to her tenant's floor on a Thursday night?" She shrugged. "The rain, the quiet, loneliness, probably." It wasn't self-pitying, just honest. "I get that," I said. "Some days I don't know if I'm moving towards something or just drifting." She looked at me then, really looked. "You're not drifting. You're waiting for something to matter." I didn't know what to say to that. She took another sip, then said softly, "I've been running the store for 12 years, built it up from nothing. And most days, I feel like I've built a very tidy, very polite prison for myself." I glanced at her, unsure if I should respond or just listen. Her voice didn't waver, but there was something in her eyes, like she was letting a window open just a crack. "I thought it would feel like a life," she went on, "but sometimes it just feels like habit. The same keys, the same shelves, the same kind of quiet. That doesn't sound like nothing to me." She smiled faintly, shaking her head. "You're kind, but kind isn't the same as knowing." I nodded slowly. "Maybe, but sometimes the people who don't know everything see things clearer." She didn't reply to that, just looked down at her wine. The silence that followed wasn't heavy, though. It felt suspended, like we were both hovering in a moment that neither of us wanted to define too quickly. Then she reached across the narrow space between us and placed her hand on mine just for a second. "I shouldn't be here," she said barely above a whisper. "This is reckless." "But you're here," I did quietly. Her eyes met mine. There was tension, yakis, but also something calm in the way we were sitting, in the way we weren't rushing it. Her fingers lingered just long enough before she pulled back. We finished the wine slowly, talked about books we hated, places we wanted to see, people we used to be. Her laugh came easier after a while. She told me she once shaved her head on a dare in college. I told her I used to write poems I'd never show anyone. Around late evening, the bottle was nearly empty. She stood, brushing off her coat. "Lock the door behind me?" she asked, pausing at the top of the stairs. I followed her out. Rain was still falling softly, coating the street lights in a quiet glow. She turned toward her side of the building, but stopped. Then, without a word, she stepped closer and leaned in. Her lips brushed mine. Not hesitant, not unsure, just a quiet decision in the middle of a rainy night. When she pulled back, there was a trace of something unreadable in her face. Not regret, just gravity. "I'll see you tomorrow," she said softly. Then she disappeared into the dark, her footsteps fading down the alley. I stood there for a long time after, hand on the doorframe, tasting the moment like it might disappear if I tried to name it too soon. I didn't sleep much that night, not because I was restless, but because every time I closed my eyes, I could still feel the ghost of her lips on mine. It wasn't a long kiss, or even a bold one, but it carried a weight that didn't match its softness. I kept replaying it in my head, the way her hand had found mine earlier, the way she'd looked at me after. She wasn't someone who did things impulsively. That much I already knew. So, the fact that she did meant something. The next day passed slow and strange. I heard her moving around the store below, the occasional bump of boxes or shuffle of bookshelves. I wanted to go down there, say something, anything, but I didn't. I figured if she needed space, I'd give it, and if she wanted to forget what happened, I'd understand that, too, even if I didn't want to. But that evening, just as the sky was fading into that pale violet shade that only seems to last a few minutes, I heard a knock at the back stairwell door. I opened it and found her standing there again. This time she didn't say anything. She just looked at me, eyes steady, lips parted slightly like she was about to speak, then changed her mind. Then she stepped inside. No umbrella, no coat. Her hair was damp from the misty air, strands falling loose around her face. She looked different, less guarded somehow, like the mask she usually wore in daylight had quietly slipped away. I told myself I wouldn't come up here, she said finally. Why did you? She took a slow breath. Because this is reckless. But I want it. I didn't answer. I just stepped forward and kissed her. This time there was no hesitation, no pause to consider. Her hands found my shoulders. Mine slid around her waist. And everything that had been carefully unspoken between us spilled into that moment. The kiss deepened, slow, but full of all the things we hadn't let ourselves feel out loud. She pulled back slightly, her eyes scanning my face. Are you sure? I nodded. I've never been more sure. We moved together like people who had been waiting for the right moment and finally stopped pretending they weren't. The tension between us didn't explode. It unraveled one thread at a time. There was no rush, no loud declarations, just her guiding me toward the stairs that led to her side of the building, fingers laced with mine, breath steady, but shallow. Her apartment above the shop was nothing like mine. Warm, light, soft rugs, old furniture that had clearly been loved for years. A stack of books sat on the kitchen counter, a half-finished cup of tea still warm by the sink. It smelled like whisk and citrus. I always imagined this space would feel empty, I said as she closed the door behind us. Sometimes it does, she replied, voice barely above a whisper. But not tonight. She reached for me again and we kissed longer this time, more certain. And slowly, gently, things moved past the point of wondering. We crossed into something deeper, into skin against skin, breath against breath. Not wild or dramatic, just real, like we were both remembering how to be close to someone after a long time of pretending we didn't need it. Every touch felt like a new kind of language, the kind you don't learn from books. She led but never dominated. I followed but never surrendered. It was equal, like an exchange. Each moment a question answered without words. We took our time, shedding years of solitude with every quiet motion. Later, when we lay tangled in soft blankets, the windows cracked open to let in the cool breeze. She turned toward me in the dark. I haven't done that in a long time, she said softly. Was it a mistake? She was quiet for a moment. Then, no, but I don't know what it means yet. I understood. Nothing had been promised, nothing owed. But there was a truth in the space between us now that couldn't be taken back. I'm not in a rush, I said. Just don't shut me out. She looked at me then, really looked. Then she leaned over and pressed her forehead gently to mine. I'm trying, Moo. We fell asleep like that. No dramatic confessions, no labels. Just the sound of the rain starting up again against the window and the warm rhythm of her breathing beside me. When I woke up, the room smelled like fresh coffee. I followed the scent to the small kitchen where she stood in one of those oversized sweaters people only wear when they feel comfortable. She looked over her shoulder at me, eyebrows raised slightly like she was still deciding whether this had been a moment or the start of something else. Coffee? She asked. I smiled, only if it comes with another morning like this. She didn't answer right away, but she poured me a cup and I took that as a yes. After that night, everything shifted. It wasn't official, not like we sat down and had a conversation about what we were, but Elena and I slipped into this rhythm, something that felt natural even though it defied explanation. Every evening after she closed up the bookstore, I'd wait for the quiet tap on my ceiling, her broom handle against the floor, a small signal, an invitation. I'd head downstairs without a word, sometimes with dinner I'd made, sometimes just with my hands in my pockets and a quiet smile. Her place smelled like cedar and books, always warm, always lived in. The couch became our refuge. Meals on the coffee table, her legs tucked under her, glasses perched low on her nose when she read aloud something she found funny or beautiful. There were nights we didn't do anything special, just sat close, talked about old memories or strange customers she'd had that day. I learned that she used to live in Paris in her 20s, worked at a publishing house, that she never married, that the bookstore had been her escape from a life that had started feeling too controlled, too expected. She learned I'd been raised by a single mom, that I had a thing for documentary films, and couldn't cook rice properly to save my life. Somehow these ordinary pieces of ourselves felt precious when shared, like building something small and fragile out of trust. We kept it private. We had to. The bookstore had been in that neighborhood for over 15 years. And Elena had worked hard to build her reputation as a business owner people respected. If anyone found out about us, especially the way it started, it would raise eyebrows. She was cautious, always looking twice when we walked close together. Always checking the windows before pulling me into a kiss. But the secrecy gave it a certain sweetness, too. Felt like a hidden world, ours alone. We'd steal touches in the narrow hallway between the bookstore and her apartment. I'd brush her hand when no one was looking. Sometimes she'd whisper something under her breath as I walked past while she helped a customer. And I'd have to fight to keep my face neutral. There were nights we didn't make it to the couch. Nights where the wine sat untouched on the table while she pulled me close by my collar the second the door shut behind me. There was a hunger in those moments. Years of restraint unwinding into something desperate and soft all at once. But even then, even in those quiet, breathless hours, it wasn't just about want. There was care in the way she held me after, in the way her fingers traced slow patterns on my shoulder like she was still learning me. One evening, I found her in the back room of the shop, struggling to lift a box of returns. Without asking, I slid beside her and took the weight. She didn't say anything at first, just watch me. Then, after a long pause, she said softly, "I haven't let anyone this close in years." The way she said it, like it hurt a little to admit, made something catch in my chest. I looked at her and said, "I don't want to be just passing through." She didn't answer with words. She just kissed me long and quiet, like gratitude, like a promise she was scared to make. Still, we both knew the arrangement was delicate. We heard things. A neighbor asking if I was Elena's nephew. A woman in the flower shop next door raising an eyebrow when she saw me come out of the back door one morning. Nothing direct, not yet. But Elena grew more alert. She'd pulled back when someone passed us on the street. She stopped tapping on the ceiling and started texting instead. Brief, careful messages. But even with the caution, I never felt her retreat. If anything, our time together became even more intimate, more intentional. We moved slower, laughed more, lingered over dinner. She started letting me help organize the back office, trusted me with the ordering system. I started reading more, trying to understand the book she loved. I even found a first edition of one of her favorite authors online and surprised her with it. She cried just a little. She tried to hide it, but I saw. The whispers started softly, like background noise you can almost ignore until you can't. First, it was little things. A pause in conversation when I walked into the coffee shop down the block. A look from the florist next door that lingered just a second too long. Even the mailman, who usually barely grunted a greeting, suddenly seemed overly polite, like he knew something, but didn't want to say it out loud. Elena tried not to let it show, but I could see it wearing on her, the subtle way she avoided standing too close to me outside the store. How she stopped reaching for my hand when we walked the short stretch to the bakery on Sundays. We used to share glances that felt like our secret. Now her eyes darted to nearby windows before settling on mine. "I think Mrs. Keene saw me leaving last night," I said one morning, sitting at the counter in her apartment while she fixed tea. She didn't look up. Probably. And Elena stirred the tea in silence, then finally looked at me. This neighborhood, it remembers things. People don't forget. They just wait for the right moment to remind you. I sighed. "So we're hiding again." She gave a small, tired smile. We never really stopped. The distance didn't come all at once. It slipped in like fog. We were still together most evenings, still sharing dinners, still tangled under blankets as the bookstore fell silent below us. But the conversations changed. Laughter gave way to quiet. Her shoulders seemed heavier, her words more careful. One night I brought it up. I don't know how much longer I can do this, I said. Pretend we're nothing when we're not. She didn't argue. She just exhaled slowly, staring out the window. I know. I'm not saying we need to announce it to the world, I added. But I don't want to feel like I'm some mistake you're trying to hide. Her jaw tightened slightly. It's not about you, Ethan. It's about me, my life, the store, everything I've built. People don't understand this. Then let them misunderstand, I said. Let them talk. They're going to anyway. She turned to me then, her expression hard to read. Part fear, part exhaustion. I've spent so long trying to be taken seriously as a woman, as a business owner. I don't get to be careless. You think being with me is careless? She winced immediately, regretting the word. That's not what I meant, but it's what you feel. We didn't yell. We weren't that kind of couple. But the silence after that felt louder than shouting ever could. She left early that night. I sat in my apartment staring at the ceiling, wondering if the whole thing was starting to unravel. But just after midnight, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find her standing there, coat half zipped, hair slightly damp from the rain. Her eyes looked tired but clear. Without saying a word, she stepped in and closed the door behind her. Couldn't sleep, she said. Me neither. I tried to tell myself it would be easier to pull away. She continued, voice trembling slightly. But all I kept thinking was how empty everything felt without you. I didn't answer. I just reached for her. And she came to me like she was finally done pretending she didn't need to. That night, the closeness between us felt different. It wasn't urgent like the first time, and it wasn't tender in the usual way either. It was desperate, like both of us were holding on to something that felt like it might slip away if we loosened our grip even slightly. She kissed me with a kind of rawness I hadn't felt before, pulling me into her with both fear and need in equal measure. We moved together slowly, but with weight, every touch saying what we hadn't found the words for. Afterward, we lay there in the dark, our breath slowly sinking, the silence no longer heavy, but full of meaning. I'm terrified, she whispered, forehead resting against mine. But I can't stay away from you. Then stop running, I said quietly. We'll face it together, one step at a time. She didn't reply, but the way her hands slid into mine, fingers locking tight, was all the answer I needed. The shift didn't happen all at once. It was gradual, quiet, like waking up one morning and realizing the season had changed without telling anyone. Elena and I didn't have some grand conversation about what we were going to do next. We just kept going. But something between us settled after that night. The fear didn't vanish completely, but it stopped steering the wheel. I started tutoring part-time at a community center across town. A friend had told me they were short-staffed and the flexible hours worked with my bookstore evenings. At first, it felt like just another thing to do, but it gave me a sense of purpose I hadn't expected. Watching kids wrestle with sentences or light up when they solved a problem reminded me why I'd applied to grad school in the first place. Elena noticed the change in me. You're different, she said one night while we were stacking books after closing. Better or worse, she smirked. Better, more rooted. I laughed. That's a very bookstore way of saying it. She rolled her eyes, but I could tell she meant it. And in return, I tried to give something back. I started spending time helping her reorganize the shop. Not just lifting boxes or adjusting displays, but bringing in new ideas. A weekly newsletter, a section for younger readers, even hosting a local book club on Thursdays. At first, she resisted. She'd built the store with her own hands, and I knew the idea of changing it, even in small ways, made her nervous. But eventually, she let me in. You're good at this? She admitted one evening as we worked on a new front table display. You mean stacking books in alphabetical order? I mean making this place feel alive again. I looked at her, caught off guard by the vulnerability in her voice. You did that first. I'm just following your lead. Another kiss followed, the kind that didn't need to be heated or hungry, just full of quiet knowing. Our nights became slower, more intentional. We still had moments of urgency, but more often there was patience in the way we undressed each other. She started leaving her hair down more often around me. I started keeping an extra shirt in her apartment drawer. There was one night in particular that stuck with me. We had spent hours reorganizing the nonfiction section, followed by dinner, takeout on the floor of her apartment, surrounded by open books and half-drunk glasses of wine. I was tired, my shirt stained with soy sauce, and she had her legs draped across my lap as she read aloud from a poetry collection we'd found on a forgotten back shelf. Her voice was soft, slower than usual, and then she paused, lowered the book, and looked at me. "You've changed this place," she said. "Not just the shop. Me." I brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. "You changed me first." It was the kind of moment that didn't need to be chased with anything more. We just sat there, her head resting on my chest, the bookstore quietly humming beneath us. We started talking about the future, not in dramatic, life-altering ways, just small threads. Could we grow the business? Should I apply to schools out of state or stay close? What would it look like to be seen together openly in the neighborhood? No answers yet, but the questions were being asked. For the first time, it didn't feel like we were walking a tightrope. It felt like we were building a bridge. One morning, I came downstairs and found her behind the counter, reviewing supplier invoices with a pen in her mouth. She looked up and said, "You know, if you want to make that poetry night idea happen, I'm in." I blinked. "Really?" She nodded. "Let's stop hiding. Let's start inviting people in." It wasn't a declaration of love. It wasn't even a plan, but it was something. And it felt like the beginning of the next version of us. The night of the poetry reading arrived without fanfare, but it felt like something more than just an event. It was Elena's idea to keep it small. Just a handful of regulars, a couple of local writers she'd supported over the years, and a few curious neighbors who had wandered in after seeing the flyer taped to the shop's door. We cleared space between the shelves, arranged chairs in loose rows, and pushed a little antique table to the front as a makeshift stage. A kettle of tea steamed behind the counter. A plate of store-bought I had cookies sat untouched. But it didn't matter. People were here. And for the first time, I wasn't just the guy upstairs. I stood beside her that evening, not behind her. We didn't make a grand announcement or hold hands for everyone to see. But we didn't need to. The space between us was different now, and anyone who cared to look would feel it. I introduced the first reader. Elena dimmed the lights, and just like that, the store shifted from quiet business to soft gathering. Words filled the space between shelves. Funny, messy, beautiful poems about loss and weather and memory. Elena stood at the back, her arms crossed, but I saw the way her face softened when the words were good. Midway through, she came to stand next to me. Our shoulders brushed. She didn't move away. After the last poem, people clapped politely. Conversations bloomed in the corners. I poured tea for a retired teacher who confessed she hadn't been to a reading since the 90s. Elena laughed softly with a couple she knew from the antique store up the block. No one asked questions. No one whispered. Later, when the chairs were stacked and the lights turned low, we walked the short distance back to her apartment in silence. It had rained while we were inside. The street glistened with puddles reflecting storefronts and street lamps. She slid her hand into mine as we turned the corner. Just like that. No hesitation. "You know," she said, "they're still going to talk." "Let them," I said. "They talked when we were hiding, too." She smiled. "You've made me braver than I wanted to be. You've made me belong more than I thought I could." When we got inside, she lit a candle instead of flipping on the lights. The apartment glowed with a warm, flickering kind of peace. We didn't rush. There was no urgency anymore that night. Our intimacy was something new. Not tentative, not fiery, not tangled in secrecy. It was steady, confident. The way her fingers moved along my back as we kissed, slow and sure. The way I lifted her sweater over her shoulders like it was second nature. We undressed each other with reverence, like people choosing to be seen fully. No shadows, no holding back. After we lay there in the hush of the bookstore ceiling below us, her head on my chest, my fingers trailing lazy circles on her arm. "I used to think this place was all I needed," she said. "The shop, my space, my rules. And now," she tilted her head just enough to meet my eyes, You turned my quiet life into something worth sharing. I smiled. You gave me more than a room upstairs. You gave me a home. The words hung between us, soft and certain. She didn't respond right away. She just nestled closer and closed her eyes. The next morning, we opened the store together. No more side doors. No more carefully staggered exits. I stood behind the counter helping her restock a shipment of new arrivals while she handled the register. A few regulars came in, said hello, smiled a little longer than usual. No one asked questions, and when we locked the door at dusk, the streets still warm with the last light of day, she turned the sign to closed and looked at me. "We made it," she said. I nodded. "And it's just beginning." We didn't kiss in that moment. We didn't need to. She took my hand and we walked home together through the quiet, through the neighborhood that once felt like it could never accept us. But now it was just another place where we had history and something ahead of us. And when the lights turned off for the night and the bookstore fell silent, it wasn't just a business closing. It was a chapter ending and a better one starting. The story of Ethan and Elena unfolding above the quiet shelves of Willow and Company books is a tender testament to the beauty of unexpected connections and the courage it takes to embrace them. At 26, Ethan, a young man adrift after college, finds himself drawn to Elena, the poised, independent bookstore owner in her early 40s, whose life seems meticulously ordered, yet quietly lonely. Their bond begins with fleeting glances through alley windows and cautious conversations, blossoming into shared wine, stolen kisses, and a love that defies whispers from a watchful neighborhood. Despite the fear of judgment in Elena's hard-earned reputation, they choose vulnerability over secrecy, transforming a tidy, solitary existence into a shared home filled with warmth and meaning. This narrative teaches us a profound lesson. Life's richest moments often emerge from the courage to step beyond our carefully built walls, to risk connection in the face of doubt. Elena's guarded heart and Ethan's quiet persistence remind us that love isn't bound by age or convention. It thrives in the small intentional acts like a hand brushing another or a poetry night that invites a community in. Their journey shows that true belonging comes from choosing authenticity over fear, from building bridges instead of hiding in shadows. It's a call to cherish the connections that make us feel seen, to embrace the reckless beauty of wanting more from life even when it's terrifying. If this heartfelt story of love and bravery stirred something in you, share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever taken a leap to connect with someone unexpected? Hit the like button if their courage inspired you, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that capture the quiet magic of human connection. Your support helps us keep these narratives alive. Join our community and let's explore life's lessons.